The wind howled through the pines as Hannah stumbled along the snowy ridge, her boots slipping on the ice-slicked path. She clutched her coat tighter, squinting against the gusts, and once again she saw him, the white dog just ahead, watching. He was there every time she got close to the forest's edge, silent, still, fluffy fur rippling like snowflakes in motion. At first she had thought he was a stray. Then, when no one else ever saw him, she began to wonder if he was something else entirely. Something only meant for her. Her mother said it was nerves. The principal said it was imagination. Even the kids whispered about ghost dogs and lonely new girls. But the tracks she found last week in the fresh snow were real. She knew they were. And now, with the sky bruising and the storm closing in, Hannah followed. She had no idea where he was leading her, only that he had paused, turned his head, and waited. Then he vanished around the bend.
Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update.
The wind whispered low through the trees, brushing snow from the pine branches like a cautious hand clearing dust from old memories. Hannah walked with her chin tucked into the collar of her coat, boots crunching the brittle crust of the forest floor where winter still held the land in its frozen grip. Her breath left her mouth in puffs that quickly vanished, and with every step deeper into the woods, she could feel the cold sneaking beneath her sleeves. She did not know exactly what she was looking for, only that he had been there again last night, watching from the edge of the trees, the white dog with the eyes that seemed older than time and softer than any snow she had ever touched. It had started the week after they moved into the cabin. Her mother said it would be temporary, a fresh start. Hannah did not ask what they were starting over from. She already knew. He had left everything behind after her father's accident, and now they lived in a place where nobody knew her name, and even fewer wanted to. The other kids at school looked at her like she was a ghost drifting through their hallways. Teachers asked if she needed help catching up, speaking softly as if she might shatter. She kept her head down, did her work, and then came home to the woods where the trees did not ask questions and the wind never pitied her. The first time she saw the dog, it had been snowing. Not the heavy kind that blanketed everything, but soft, quiet flakes falling like ashes. She had been staring out the back window when a shape emerged near the tree line. At first she thought it was part of the snowdrift shifting in the wind. Then it moved, graceful and deliberate. A dog, white as the snow around him, stepping through the trees like he belonged to them. She pressed her hands against the glass, heart thudding fast, but by the time her mother turned to look, the dog was gone. Days passed, then a week. And every so often, she would see him again. At first, only from a distance. Then closer. Once she saw his eyes, deep brown with flecks of amber. They met hers for the briefest moment. She had never seen such sadness and calm in the same glance. The dog never barked, never ran, never wagged his tail. He simply watched, then vanished. She told her mother. Her mother smiled gently and said it was probably just a neighbor's pet, but there were no neighbors close enough for that to make sense. She told her teacher. The woman gave her that same soft voice and asked if she missed her father. She stopped telling people after that, but she kept watching. Now she was walking the edge of the forest path again, just where the trail curved and dipped into thicker woods. Snow clung to the low branches, and icicles dangled from limbs like glass teeth. The sky was beginning to change, fading from pale silver to deepening blue, the kind of blue that only came before a storm. Her boots left prints behind her, careless, uneven marks in a line, but beside them she sometimes found other prints, rounded, clean, paw-shaped. She had brought the scarf today. It had belonged to her father. She wrapped it tighter around her neck, more for comfort than warmth. With each step she listened. The trees creaked in the cold. A jay screamed from somewhere above. But beneath those sounds there was something else. A hush, a watching. The dog was near. She could feel it. She paused near a large fir tree and knelt to study the snow. There, just beyond the reach of her shadow, was a single paw print, perfectly pressed, unmistakable. She placed her hand beside it, smaller than a wolf, too far from any known trail. Her breath caught in her throat. She stood and scanned the forest. The wind picked up again, this time stronger. It swept along the ridge and scattered a flurry of snow into her face. She blinked against it, wiped her eyes, and then saw him. There, 20 feet ahead, half shrouded in the branches, white fur glowing faintly in the dim light. He did not move, he simply stared at her. Hannah's heart hammered so loud she could hear it. She took a careful step forward. The dog tilted his head slightly as if studying her. His ears perked, but he made no sound, no bark, no growl, no whimper, only stillness. Another step. The dog turned almost too gracefully and moved deeper into the woods. Without thinking, Hannah followed. Branches brushed her shoulders. The snow grew deeper. Each step became slower, more cautious. But the dog was always just ahead, visible then not. The forest changed as she went. The trees closed in, and the light vanished more quickly than she expected. The sky overhead darkened into a heavy slate gray. Snow began to fall again, thick and fast. She could still see his shape moving through the trees, always just far enough to make her question whether he was really there. But she knew, she felt it. In the prickle on her arms, in the tingle behind her eyes. This was real, he was real. She did not realize how far she had gone until she turned and could no longer see the path. Behind her, the trees looked identical. No markers, no footsteps. The wind had already erased her trail. Panic flared in her chest. But then the dog stopped. He stood still ahead of her, waiting, not turning to look this time. Just standing, his body outlined against a break in the trees where a faint light seemed to glow. Hannah stepped toward him. The snow fell harder. The wind howled louder. The scarf tugged at her neck like it wanted to fly. She reached out a hand, but the dog turned and slipped into the light. And just like that, he vanished again. The moment Nimbus vanished into the light, the air changed. It was not just the wind or the snow or the fading color of day. It was something deeper. A hush, thick and complete, pressed in on Hannah from all sides. The forest no longer whispered, it listened. Every breath she drew felt louder than it should have. Her pulse pounded in her ears. She knew she should be afraid. She was far from home, alone, no path, no markers, and yet her feet moved forward. She pushed through a narrow break in the undergrowth, following the faint shimmer that had hovered where Nimbus stood. Snow fell harder now, a dense curtain of white that blurred the trees and softened every sound. It soaked into her coat, clung to her lashes, and melted against her flushed cheeks. Her scarf had slipped loose, but she barely noticed. Her eyes scanned the woods ahead, searching for that shape, that motion, that presence. She was not chasing the dog, she was answering him. The trees thinned slightly and revealed a shallow hollow where the snow seemed untouched by the wind. Here everything felt stiller, quieter, as if time slowed. The dog was there again at the far side of the clearing, sitting this time, waiting. Hannah stopped. Nimbus did not move. His fur looked almost silver in the strange light, and his eyes, even from this distance, glowed faintly with something she could not name. Not fire, not reflection, something else. She stepped forward, careful and slow, one step, then another. Her boots broke the crust of snow with soft crunches. The hollow stretched wide around them like a bowl carved gently into the woods. Pines lined the rim, tall and ancient. Their boughs curved inward, forming a kind of shelter above the clearing. Icicles hung like spears from the edges. Hannah's breath came fast and shallow. Halfway across, Nimbus stood and turned again. This time he did not vanish. He walked slowly along the far side of the hollow, pausing once to glance back. Then he slipped between two tree trunks that arched toward each other like a gate. Hannah hesitated. She turned her head to glance behind her. She could not see where she had come from. The wind and snow had erased all trace. Her footsteps were already gone. The path back no longer existed, so she followed forward. Through the arching trees she stepped into a narrow corridor of forest. The ground here was packed tighter, the trees closer together, the snow thinner. It looked as though animals had passed through, leaving trails now softened by time. The silence here was different, not oppressive but respectful, like a cathedral made of bark and frost. Nimbus moved ahead, barely disturbing the snow. She could not explain why she trusted him. There was no proof of safety. No clear reason to follow a strange dog into unfamiliar woods. But something in her heart whispered that she must, that he was not leading her into danger, that this was not about being found, it was about understanding why she had been called in the first place. As they moved, the air began to shift. It grew warmer, barely, subtle, but real. The snow thinned further until she began to see patches of dark earth peeking through. The light filtering down was strange, gray, gold, and green, all blended together. She could hear water now. A slow trickle, a stream somewhere close. They reached a bend in the path and Hannah stopped. Ahead lay a small clearing wrapped around a partially frozen creek. Rocks jutted from the bank like bones. Ferns, half dead from frost, clung stubbornly to the shadows. Nimbus stood at the edge of the water, head bowed, staring into the icy flow. His reflection rippled in the current. Hannah stepped forward, drawn by the quiet intensity of the place. Her breath came out in visible clouds. She reached the stream and knelt beside him, peering into the water. At first she saw only stones and pale moss, then something else, a glint, a shimmer, a shape. For the briefest moment she saw herself reflected in the water, not as she was but as she had been, standing in the hallway of their old house, coat in hand, waiting for her father to open the door. He had been laughing. She had been smiling. Then the image vanished, broken by the ripple of a pine needle falling from above. She gasped softly and looked at Nimbus. He met her gaze, still silent. Still calm, and something in her heart cracked open. She did not understand what was happening, not fully. But she knew that this place, this dog, this moment, it mattered. More than anything that had come before, more than her confusion, more than her fear. There was meaning here, even if it was not yet clear. She reached out a hand, not to touch, but simply to acknowledge. Thank you, she thought, even if she never said it aloud. Nimbus turned again and walked downstream, paws barely making a sound. She followed. The stream curved through the woods and led them into a space unlike any she had seen before. An old fire ring, overgrown with snow-dusted grass, marked the center. Faint outlines of benches made from logs circled it. The remains of a campsite, abandoned long ago. Nimbus circled once, then sat near one of the log stumps. Hannah approached, heart pounding. She knew this place, not from memory, from dreams. Night after night since the move, she had dreamed of a fire crackling in this very ring. Of laughter echoing through the trees, of voices calling names she could not quite remember. The dreams always ended with the sound of a dog barking in the distance. She stared at Nimbus, eyes wide. You were in them, she thought, before I ever saw you. He looked at her without blinking. The sky overhead began to change again. The storm was coming faster now, clouds rolling in like ink spilled across parchment. Snow would fall heavier. Darkness would settle soon. She needed to return. But how? As if sensing her worry, Nimbus stood and padded toward the far side of the clearing. Then he barked, once, sharp, clear, the only sound he had made since the very beginning. The forest seemed to respond. A gust of wind swept through, scattering snow from the trees in swirling flakes. And then she heard it, a voice. Faint, carried on the breeze, her name. Someone was calling her. The voice that drifted through the trees was thin, almost swallowed by the wind, but it was unmistakable. Hannah. Someone was calling her name. She froze near the edge of the forgotten campsite, heart racing, ears straining to catch it again. The gust died down, and for a moment there was only silence. Then, faintly, her name came again, carried on the air like a thread, pulling her back from the dreamlike world she had wandered into. Nimbus stood motionless beside her, eyes watching the trees, ears slightly turned as if he too recognized the voice. His tail flicked once, slow and steady. Hannah's mind whirled. Who could it be? Her mother, a search party? Had someone noticed she was missing? Time had slipped from her without warning. The light had faded into dusk, and now the clouds above churned with the weight of approaching snow. She had not realized how far she had come or how long she had been gone. She turned in a slow circle, trying to retrace the path in her mind. The clearing felt deeper than it had before. The trees, older, the shadows now draped thick between the trunks. There was no trail, no visible way back. Her boots left faint prints that the wind quickly covered. Her breath hitched. Nimbus stepped forward again, heading toward the sound, not away from it, toward it. Hannah hesitated, then followed. The forest seemed to fold around them once more, not in threat, but in quiet watchfulness, as if it knew they were not finished yet. The sound of the voice faded. In its place came a strange harmony, wind in branches, snow brushing needles, and somewhere, distant but real, the faint murmur of water. She had the feeling they were walking between layers of the forest that others had long forgotten. Old roots tangled below. The trees whispered with memory. This place was not on any map. They passed through another arch of trees, their branches woven tightly above like the ribs of a great wooden cathedral. The ground dipped slightly, and the snow grew thinner, replaced by dark earth strewn with pine needles. The smell changed, less frost, more loam. A small stone marker jutted from the ground, worn smooth by time. It bore no name. Hannah paused beside it, brushing off snow with her glove. Her fingers traced the cold surface. It looked like a grave, though unmarked. Nimbus stood a few feet ahead, watching her again. She stood and moved on. Soon the trees opened to a ridge. From here the forest fell away below like a great basin. The trees beyond were darker, denser, but nestled among them, tucked low into the earth, was a structure, a cabin, small, crooked, old. Smoke drifted from a narrow chimney, faint, blue-gray, as if the fire inside had only just been kindled. Hannah blinked, her breath caught in her throat. There was no road leading to it. No signs of recent passage, and yet it stood firm in the snow, its roof heavy with white, its door slightly ajar. Nimbus began to descend toward it without hesitation. She followed, steps careful but drawn by something she could not name. The closer she got, the more familiar it felt, not in detail but in mood. Like a memory half remembered, a dream that tugged at the edge of waking thought. The cabin's wood was dark with age. The windows were cloudy. She reached the bottom of the ridge and stopped beside Nimbus at the door. It creaked inward slightly with the wind. Warmth slipped through the gap. She looked at him. He sat beside the door silent. She pushed it open. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine smoke, wool, and something faintly sweet, maybe old apples or dried herbs. A single chair sat near the fireplace. A quilt was folded neatly on its back. A lantern flickered on a shelf. There were no signs of recent life, no food, no tracks, yet the fire in the hearth glowed gently, casting dancing shadows across the wooden walls. Hannah stepped inside, heart thudding. On the mantel above the fire was a framed photo. She leaned close. It was old, black and white. Blurred slightly, a man stood in the snow beside a dog, a Samoyed, white, fluffy, calm, just like Nimbus. She gasped softly and turned to look back at him. He had stepped just inside the doorway now, watching her from the threshold. She stepped toward him. He did not move. The wind rose again outside. The cabin creaked gently in reply. Her fingers brushed the photo. On the back, written in faded pencil, were the words, Guardian 1934. She stared at it, breath shallow. Guardian, the name. Or the role. Nimbus blinked slowly, then turned and stepped back outside. She followed, heart full of questions. Outside, the snow began again, heavier now. The world blurred into gray and white. She could barely see past the first few trees. Nimbus moved slowly through it, but purposefully. She stayed close behind. The forest no longer felt unfamiliar. It felt vast, yes, but known, as if it had accepted her presence. They climbed a low hill together. At the top, Nimbus stopped. Ahead was the path, faint but real. She recognized a bend, a boulder, a fallen log with its bark stripped bare. She knew this place. She was close to home. She turned to thank him, but he was gone. No bark. No movement, only falling snow. She spun in a circle, calling his name into the hush, though she knew he would not answer. There were no pawprints in the snow, just her own, leading up the hill. She stood still, heart aching with something that felt like gratitude and loss at once. Then far behind her, from deep in the trees, came a single sound, a bark, one clear bark like a promise, then silence. The bark echoed faintly in the stillness before fading into the folds of the forest, like a breath held too long and finally let go. Hannah stood at the top of the ridge, the cold curling around her ankles and rising through the seams of her coat, yet she barely noticed. That single bark, clear, strong, undeniable, was proof. He had been real. More real than anything anyone in town had believed. More real than the stories whispered by classmates. More real than the polite nods from teachers who thought she was making it all up. The wind tugged at her scarf again, now damp with melted snow. Her fingers trembled as she pulled it tighter, not from fear, but from the heaviness of everything she had just seen. The cabin in the woods, the photo above the hearth, the name, Guardian. She whispered it to herself as she descended the ridge toward the trail she now recognized, like repeating a secret meant only for her. Each step came easier now. The forest still loomed, but it no longer felt like a maze. It felt like a story that had finally let her inside. Snow fell steadily, layering over her footprints, but the landmarks ahead grew more familiar with every bend. The fork in the path with the leaning birch. The crooked stump shaped like a heart. Knew them, she was nearly home. And yet, just as the cabin roofs of the community came into view, soft shadows behind a veil of snowfall, Hannah stopped. There, pressed into the fresh snow just beside the trail, was a single pawprint. Not hers, not from any dog she had seen before, but they're all the same. It was deep, clean, edged with slight melt from fresh warmth. She knelt beside it and placed her hand just next to the impression. It was the same size as before. Nimbus. He had been here again. Watching, following, maybe leading, even when she had not known it. And beside that pawprint, something more. Letters, scratched lightly in the snow as if made by a stick or claw. A word, believe. Her throat tightened. She blinked and rubbed her eyes with her sleeve. The snow softened the word quickly, the flakes blurring its edges, but she had seen it, clear as anything, believe. She rose slowly and continued down the path, the trees parting as she reached the edge of the community. The first porch lights flickered on in the distance, casting pale halos in the thickening snow. She saw movement, her mother on the steps of their cabin, bundled in a coat, calling out softly into the wind. Hannah hurried forward. Her mother turned, eyes wide, arms reaching out. They met in the middle of the yard where the wind pushed at their backs and the snow clung to their eyelashes. Her mother's hug was tight, almost crushing, but Hannah held on just as hard. She did not cry, not now. There would be time for that later. Her mother asked questions. Where had she gone? Was she hurt? Did she get lost? But Hannah could only nod and shake her head, the answers too tangled to speak out loud just yet. That night, warm inside the cabin, she sat wrapped in blankets with a mug of hot tea cupped in both hands. Her mother paced nearby, phone in hand, speaking in hushed tones to someone, maybe the principal, maybe a neighbor. But Hannah sat in stillness, eyes turned toward the frosted window. Out there, beyond the trees, he was watching. She was sure of it. The next day, her mother kept her home from school. Snow blanketed everything, thick and unmoving, as if the world had paused. Hannah dressed quietly and stepped outside alone, boots crunching in the untouched white. She made her way back to the edge of the woods where the path began. She waited. No bark came, no pawprints, no shimmer between the trees, just the cold and the sky and the stillness. She returned the next day, and the next, nothing. But on the third day, she brought something with her. She carried a scarf, not hers, not her father's, a new one, soft gray, the color of clouds before snow. She placed it carefully on the branch of the leaning birch tree and whispered softly into the woods, "Thank you." That night she dreamed of the cabin again, but this time the fire burned brighter, and the chair was empty, waiting. School resumed. The world moved on. Hannah spoke little but walked with more purpose. Her teachers noticed. Her mother smiled more often, though still worried in her eyes. The kids in class left her alone. A few, curious now, asked her quietly if she really had seen the ghost dog. She told them no, not a ghost, a guardian. Most did not understand, but a few nodded like they almost believed. Weeks passed, then came the call. A group of hikers had gone missing in the woods, a father and two sons. Search teams gathered near the trailhead. Her mother brought food, others brought flashlights and snowshoes. Hannah stood at the edge, near the trees, heart pounding. The snow had begun again, cold and clean. She watched the forest. Hours passed. Just before dusk, a voice cried out. Then more. The family was found, cold but alive. They had been led back to the main trail by a white dog, no tags, no collar, just a dog. No one could catch him. He vanished before anyone could get close. The next day, Hannah returned to the woods. At the place where she had left the scarf, something new rested beneath the tree. A pinecone, clean, dry, wrapped with a thin strip of gray wool, and beside it, pawprints. The pawprints were fresh. Hannah knelt beside them, heart quickening. They trailed from the pinecone offering into the woods, leading gently uphill toward the older paths she had explored only in dreams. She touched the snow where one of the prints pressed deepest, and the cold did not sting. It felt strangely like permission. She stood slowly, scarf tucked firm around her neck, eyes scanning the tree line. Nothing moved, no dog, no shimmer, no sound, but something deep in her chest, a quiet certainty told her he was close. She stepped into the forest. The trail was not marked on any map. It curled between leaning trees, passed through thickets of dry branches and groves of bare aspen, then climbed into a ridge of granite and wind-worn fir. Snow fell in slow flakes now, heavier with meaning than with weight. With every turn, memories seemed to surface in the spaces between trunks, not hers alone. Echoes of other stories, a girl in a red jacket standing in a clearing, her hands cupped around a compass. A boy with a twisted ankle leaning against a stump, whispering a name. A man alone beneath the stars, tears freezing on his face. Each vision flickered only for a heartbeat, then vanished. Guardian, Nimbus had walked here before, for them, for all of them. The wind shifted. Hannah stopped at the crest of a small hill and saw, in the distance, another cabin, smaller than the first. More fragile, its roof bowed inward, its windows gone. Only the frame remained, held together by time and memory, and in front of it, Nimbus. He stood in perfect stillness, facing her. This time she did not hesitate. She moved quickly through the snow, heart thudding with something close to joy. When she reached the edge of the clearing, she stopped. Nimbus did not move. His eyes held hers, deep brown flecked with firelight, though no fire burned. His fur glowed softly in the snowlight. The forest quieted around them. She stepped forward. Then he turned, not to walk away, but to stand beside her, facing the cabin. Together, they stood there for what felt like hours. Time folded around them. The world outside the forest did not matter. She wanted to ask him so many things, who he had helped, why he had come to her. Why her of all people, but no words came, only feeling. Nimbus lowered his head slightly and took a step forward, toward the broken cabin. Hannah followed. Inside, snow had claimed the floor. Moss crept through cracks in the beams, but something about the space was warm, not in temperature, in memory. A ring of stones sat in the center where a fire once lived. She knelt beside it, and there, carved faintly into one of the stones, was a name, Elsie. She traced the letters with one finger. The snow outside thickened. When she looked up, Nimbus was watching her again. Then slowly he walked toward her. For the first time, he came close enough to touch. She held still as his cold nose brushed her fingers. His fur was thick and soft, like memory made real. He leaned gently into her hand. The breath caught in her throat. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, he was gone. No pawprints, no motion, only snow. The silence pressed in, not empty but full. She stood, fingers tingling from where he had touched her. And then from the far corner of the cabin, something caught her eye. A satchel, old leather, half buried beneath drift and dust. She pulled it free. Inside, papers, water-damaged, but one still legible, a sketch of a dog, white, fluffy, and beneath it a name, Guardian. 1934, lost, never found. Her heart stopped. She turned it over, a second name. Elsie Hamilton, age 11, the girl in the drawing, the girl who had vanished into the woods nearly a century ago. No body, no trace, just a dog sighting in the snow. Hannah stared at the paper until her eyes blurred. Guardian, he had not just protected her, he had failed once, and never stopped trying to make it right. She stepped out of the cabin and looked back at the trail. It was still there. Leading home, she followed it, down the hill, through the hush of falling snow, into the part of the forest that welcomed her now. At the edge of the trees, her mother stood waiting, arms crossed, eyes worried. Hannah ran to her. No words, only a hug. A day later, the town's small historical group confirmed the name from her sketch. They had no idea how she found it. The story of Elsie and her white dog had become a local legend, one no one fully believed, until now. They offered to keep the satchel, but Hannah said no. She kept it by her bed. Every night she ran her fingers across the name, and every so often, when the snow began to fall just right, she would look out into the woods, and there, just for a moment, she would see him, not always, not often, but enough, always watching, still guarding, still trying 60. She thought the dog was imaginary until others saw him.
Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our pawsome friends.